Welcome to your Profitable Law Firm podcast. I'm Kelly Brubaker, your dedicated host, passionate about empowering law firm owners. Let's dive into the hidden strategies that lead to overflowing profits, scaled growth, and thriving lives. This is where overwhelm transforms into confidence, enabling you to create and enjoy your dream firm and your dream life. We have a change of pace for this week's podcast. I have a guest joining us this week. I'm going to share with you a great conversation I had earlier this week, filled with marketing insights from Gyi Tsakalakis. He's a former trial lawyer, co-founder of AttorneySync, a digital marketing firm dedicated to law firms, and he's the co-host of the Lunch Hour Legal Marketing podcast. We spoke about Gyi's transition from trial attorney to digital marketing, and our conversation gets into the financial aspects of law firm marketing, emphasizing the significance of budgeting and, from an operational standpoint, your resource allocations. We also talk about tracking marketing effectiveness and balancing traditional referrals with a digital presence. So I guarantee you are going to take notes from this conversation that's filled with invaluable advice on sustaining business growth through intentional, consistent marketing efforts. Check out the show notes for links to be able to connect directly with Gyi. I hope you enjoy. So today on the podcast, I've got a guest and I'm really excited. So Gyi Tsakalakis, right? Did I say it right?
Very good. Tsakalakis is like the technical Greek, but you did an excellent job.
I took a stab at it.
It was great.
Because I actually am not sure that I've actually heard your last name before. So I'm like, I'm going to take a stab at it.
You did excellent. I know we didn't prep. Awesome. We didn't prep that at all, and you nailed it. So great job.
No, that's awesome. So Gyi, we met a couple weeks ago. So this is the end of October. We met the beginning of October at the AffinPay legal seminar, and we really we had a lot of like little conversations throughout the couple days we were there, and so it was nice to be able to connect in a different environment and one-on-one environment. And so tell me a little bit about yourself.
So thanks for having me. Great to see you. And I was a trial lawyer at a small law firm. This is like 2005-ish, and as a new lawyer, I was tasked with, hey, what should we do for marketing? And yada, 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 talked to a lot of lawyers and came back with all these ideas. And, the sentiment at the time, again, this is 2005, and it wasn't just the firm that I was working at. This was really lawyers in general. And it still comes up once in a while, but people would say things like, we just don't think that the internet's going to be a good client source for us. And I was just like, this just can't be right. And so we founded AttorneySync. My partner and I, is a good friend of mine from undergrad, founded the company in 2008. And, we've been helping lawyers try to navigate some of this digital marketing stuff since then. I've had some opportunities to be an investor and advisor to some other legal tech companies. So I've kind of lived at this intersection of law practice, technology, marketing, I'm coming up on 20 years here. So that's the relevant parts of me.
No, that's awesome. And I follow a similar, although I'm a little bit older than you. So I did a stint in public accounting, and then like I started my firm in 2005, and but I went the different path. So I love that you were dedicated, like you knew from the get-go to focus on attorneys. And that was
I wouldn't say I was super new anything. We, the way that it went was, I was like, well, I know some lawyers, so that's a great place. But I in hindsight, and again, back when we started, I wasn't very informed or educated about positioning or vertical specific positioning and any of that kind of stuff. And it was fortuitous that we went that direction. But, and for lawyers that are listening, if you don't have a vertical position, it doesn't work for all firms, but it's something to think about because it is powerful in terms of attracting the right audience if you find a way to position yourself vertically. Like and what I mean by that is like serving a very specific segment of your audience.
Yeah, and I love that. It took me a really long time. I mean, for the longest time, for at least 5 years, if you walked in my door, when I actually had an actual office, not in my basement, but when I had a real office, if you walked in my door, how can I help you? If it has anything to do with money, I'm helping you. And then And it took me a lot of going home at night, banging my head against the wall, like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And, it took me a long time to accept, yes, it's better for me to niche. And then if I serve one segment of clients, it's so much easier for me and them. And so, and I have friends now who are like, well, I'll help anybody but attorneys. I don't trust attorneys. I've been screwed by attorneys, and I don't like trust accounting. And I'm like, you know what? I've been a consumer, like even better. Like I've been a consumer. I'm divorced, so and I've had certain little skerfuffles. So I've been a consumer. So not only have I been hiring attorneys, but then I've shared office space with attorneys, and so over time, you start to learn the lingo, and then you start to see. And I definitely don't want to paint everybody like every law firm operates this way. That's not the case, but you kind of start to see segments of, okay, these are my goals, and so we operate this way, and these are my goals, and I kind of operate in that direction, and it just makes it easier when you start to segment. So
Well, it's funny.
truly, yeah,
I was going to say you chose attorneys. I was
I
kind of
did,
forced
I
into it. You
did.
chose them, so you don't have any excuses.
Well, I did choose, but it was actually kind of chosen for me. I had my very first lawyer, and this was back in early days. I was still doing taxes. Middle of February, I get this email that says, I am starting a law firm. I need to meet with you by Friday. And this was maybe like Tuesday. Um, and apparently he sent it out to like every CPA in the town, and I was the only one who replied back. And that was after I picked myself up off the floor, because I'm like, who is this asshole who thinks he's going to demand a meeting with me in the middle, like the beginning of tax season? Are you kidding me? And so I was dying, and he was all serious. And so, when he comes in a suit and tie, I'm, at this point, I'm frazzled for the week. I'm in jeans and a, t-shirt or something. And I'm like, yeah, what do you got? Well, he and I ended up hitting off. Like we became peas in a pod. So at some point we ended up, my lease ended. He needed office space. We ended up leasing offices for a while. And I worked with him for a really long time, but he essentially showed me that not every attorney is gruff and mean, and he was a real person. And that once those walls broke down, and he was like, it's funny, you're a CPA, but you're not like a normal CPA. And I said, I know. Like, we can have fun. Like, who
Right.
knew? And so he introduced me to friends that introduced me to friends, and then it just kind of, all of a sudden, I looked one day and somebody was like, do you have a niche? And I'm like, I'm not sure I do, but I think I do. It seems like my whole client load's attorneys, and so and I've had nothing but like no regrets. Like I really enjoy working with law firms. So whether it's somebody just starting out and they're just trying to get their first 100,000, to somebody that's trying to add staff, to grow, to hit 1 million, to double that and beyond. So I've really enjoyed my time that I've worked with law firms. So let
Excellent.
me ask you
Mhm.
what, and I came into this because I'm like, we've had a good, we've had some good conversations. And so I didn't really prepare a ton of questions, but then I'm like, I should have a couple. So I'm thinking, what would be one question that you wish, because I know that you get interviewed on podcast. I know you have your podcast and you get interviewed on podcasts. What's the one question that you wish people would ask you, that you're like, I'm dying, I have this information and I'm dying to share it with people? Do you have one golden nugget of information that you want to share that nobody ever asks you about?
Well, it's funny because, coming into this and, based on the conversations that we had, I don't know if I have a specific question, but the nature of questions that I wish people would talk about more are the financial aspects of marketing, right? So
Yeah.
everybody wants to ask about like what's the latest, hottest, should I be dancing on TikTok? I always joke around when Pokemon Go came out, I was literally getting messages from lawyers being like, how do we use Pokemon Go
Yeah.
for marketing? And I'm like, just missing forest for the trees here, folks. And so
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, are you talking about your budget? How are you
Yeah.
deciding how much time and money to spend on growing your law firm? Like that's what people should be talking about, because at the end of the day, I mean, you can get into all the minutia. We kind of talked about this in the
Yeah.
conversation before the show. Like we can talk tactics, we can talk platforms, we can talk strategy and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, in order for any of this to work, for this to turn into something beyond just like Gyi's saying something, you have to have resources deployed against it. And so that to me, and that's why I thought it'd be so great for us to talk, because you live at the intersection of where the P&L like hits the road, and like where are we going to deploy resources? Do we have profit? Is it coming out of profit? Are we where does the marketing budget live in my P&L? How am I deciding how to how much money and time to spend on these things? And those are the things that I want to talk about. And at the end of the day, if you like really twisted my arm and you're like, you got to decide one thing, it's really trying to figure out like, where do you want to go, right? Where do you want to go over what time period? Do you want to, and we were talking about this and we were kind of laughing about it. The thing that I always, so in the context of like trying to think about like where you're going is, the classic example is, I want to, and we see the ads for it on Facebook. You're going to double your law firm's revenue in the next 12 months. And I'm like, that's a great goal. Love hearing that you're ambitious. You want to double your growth. How are you going to pay for, how are you going to get there? Like, are you spending money? Are you spending time? And you mentioned one that I think is really important that lawyers don't think about. Like, do you have the resources to take on double the capacity in revenue?
Right.
Anyway, that's what I would tell people. If you don't ask anything else, think about the financial aspects of your growth, because everything else is just talk. It's just like, it's likes and links and that stuff you can't pay the bills with.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Here's free exposure. Well, that's great, but that's not it's not making my mortgage payment. So no, I'm definitely with you on that. And it's funny because, and we didn't even plan this, but yeah, I'm always on the flip side of those conversations, pressing clients saying, hey, I don't see a marketing budget. We're not spending, or you're spending, $100 a month on Facebook ads. How's that going for you? Because $100 a month on Facebook isn't getting you anywhere. Or like the Google. I know I've tried Google ads, and they like I can't ever hit the right targets, and you can't like filter or target very well. And so I've had the conversations on the heading in the same direction, but from a different angle. And it's like, yeah, you want to double your revenue? Great. But you have to market. I like, how else? And I think where I see a lot of attorneys kind of fall into this, like comfort zone is, well, I have good referral sources. I'm like, well, that's great, but how do you turn up the referral sources? Like the only way I know how to do it is you start whining and dining them. So now that's all time. So now you're going to be spending time taking people to dinner and breakfast and lunch and coffee and all the things. But, do you have the time for that? And you still have no guarantee. Now, I get that marketing, there's no guarantee either, but at least you have something that's running on a consistent basis, to try to be able to capture that. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, the other thing that and I've been really having a lot of conversations that, the lines are very blurry between like, what marketing people would say, like non-brand, top of funnel acquisition, right? So that's someone that like searches for like, divorce lawyer on Google. They don't know you. Maybe they're ready to hire a lawyer. Maybe they're just researching their options. And so, they're presented with the Google local pack, and it's a listing. It's got, stars there and that kind of stuff. And then the people that are at the other end of the spectrum that are like, I just do good work and people talk about it. And I'm like, the lines between those two things are totally blurred, because guess what? A lot of the people that you did good work for that refer you to somebody else, guess what they're doing? They're going to look you up online. And what are they going to see? They're going to see your Google business profile and like, how are you treating clients and what are your reviews? And are you transparent about pricing and service and all this kind of stuff? And vice versa too, because the other thing that people miss a lot on is that you can build brand online. I think the big thing that, and we talked about this a little bit, the mismatch of expectation there is people will say, whether they're sold an awareness campaign from a marketing agency or they want to just do brand awareness, they don't build any kind of accountability into it. They don't build any kind of like, hey, are we actually, how do we even measure whether our brand is growing? How do we measure whether people are finding us through this stuff. And so, I'm really big on, this, we talked about this a little bit, but this idea of qualitative attribution. So asking
Yeah.
people how you heard about us, and however you do that, there's all sorts of different ways to think about it, but you're never going to get out of that cycle of,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is working. I don't know if this is a good return on investment or return on ad spend, or, if I'm actually building brand, unless you have some kind of tracking mechanisms to build accountability into
Yeah.
it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And what's funny is, so most lawyers I talk to, and they'll say, oh, I get my new leads come in from referrals. I'm like, okay, who are your top 5 referrals? I don't know.
Right.
Okay, let's go to your intake. And you need an intake form, and it needs to be filled out, non-negotiable. There's just information. I know you need information from the beginning because you need to do your conflict check. The next thing is you need the information so that you can bill. And you need to, so there's things you need to know. And I just know you need to know this going into every single case, every single client, every single new matter. You need certain information. Add one question: how did you find us? That's it. Like, I'm not asking for a ton, and it's going to take 30 seconds to ask the question and write down the answer. And it could be, I mean, nowadays, between all the different, case management software, a lot of the software just has the intake forms electronically. So you just program it, it just captures, and it's there. And then let's talk about it in a couple months. Like, let's capture that information for 2 months, and then let's see what those sources are. I mean, and those are things that you need to know, because what if your referral source is somebody who's an attorney who's going to retire? What's
Right.
going to happen at that point? Or they're actively looking to merge with somebody else because they, in anticipation of retirement. And so that's going to dry up, and then you're screwed. And you didn't even see it coming. And
Totally.
so, it's just good to know this information. And I have
Well,
a
the
lot
other
of
the other thing.
attorneys.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I just, a lot of them just don't even want to know they don't want to know their numbers because they're so ingrained in getting the work done. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but if you don't know your history and you don't see the trends of what's happening, you're not going to make it to the next 6 months, like, because you can't get there. You can't figure it out if you don't know your history. So
No, that's right. And the other thing is, there's such a misconception, because so many times, like the lawyers that are in the, I just do good work and people refer me
yeah.
business. And by the way, just for the official record here on the podcast, if
Mhm.
you're generating referrals and you're not spending a single minute or dollar on marketing, and you're happy with your business, you're running a profitable business, you're not looking to grow,
Yeah,
great, good for you.
absolutely.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, you don't have to be the market dominating global force of law firm if you don't want to be. However, this is what I would say, and you alluded to this as well. One is
Yeah,
that how reliable are those referral sources, right? You don't
yeah,
know. It's not consistent. And the second thing that I always tell people is, the referrals aren't free, right? Whether you're wining and dining folks, or you're spending time, or even if you're just doing, long-term email follow-up, there's time and money associated with nurturing those referral relationships, and make sure that those expenses are tracked properly. Because what we hear
yeah,
from the marketing side all the time is like, oh, well, referral marketing's free and your stuff costs money. And I'm like, well, hold on. You've been flying all over the country. You've been having all these dinners. You're doing all
yeah,
this speaking. Like, have you added your Delta line item to your
absolutely.
referral budget? Like, guess what? That's not
Yeah,
free.
right.
And then the other thing that always comes up is that when we have the conversation with the just do good work and people will come of crowd, is that go call up your referral sources and ask them and be like, what is it that I do? And I bet you
Yeah.
some of those people are going to be like, you know what? Honestly, I know you're a lawyer, but I don't really know exactly what. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'll be on the phone
Right.
with a lawyer, and the lawyer's upset because someone who's been a long time referral source for them referred a case to somebody else, and then you call the person up, and you know what they say? Oh yeah, I forgot. Should have referred
Yeah,
this to you.
yeah. Oh,
So
oops, I forgot.
that's market. That's where
Yeah.
marketing comes into play.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I've been a business owner for almost 20 years, and I actually started off that same way, where, I started off no ad spend at all. And it was told a friend who told a friend who was like, oh, so and so owns a business, and then they need help, and then this person needs a tax return done, and and it just grew, grassroots, and that was great for a while, and then that kind of stopped, and I was like, uh-oh, what did I do? Or, oh, more importantly, what didn't I do? So, I mean, if you're not nurturing stuff, like, it just goes away. So no,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
And the other thing
So
too is,
yeah,
and it varies from practice to practice area, but if you're in a
yeah,
practice where you don't have a lot of repeat business,
yeah,
your expectations in terms of like what you need to quote unquote feed your business machine, they grow over time. And if you're just relying on just the
yeah,
referrals as they come in, it might not support that. And so again, it's not an either or proposition. You got to do both. You should be
yeah,
you should be creating demand, you should be building brand, you should be nurturing referrals. And if you
yeah,
want to grow incrementally on top of that, then you should be thinking about how you're going to deploy resources to fill top of funnel with, quote unquote, non-brand
yeah.
direct response attribution or acquisition.
No, absolutely. Well, and then even, you made a good point. Like, if you want to grow, I mean, I have clients who, or, well, I should say prospects, because we end up, for whatever reason, they're like, nope, I'm good with status quo. And I support that. If you're happy with how things are, like, I'll have people who have heard me speak, or they discovered my podcast, or, my book or something. And so that we meet, and I'll say, and I'm by all means, whatever you want your business to do for you, that I want that for you. So whether that includes me or not, like, I hope I'm part of the journey. But I've had a lot of people who are like, well, I'm happy that I make 100,000 a year. I'm happy. Like, if that's what you want and you don't want to grow, then you're right. You probably don't need to pay money to sit and talk to me. I mean, we can talk about things, and I'm happy to have those conversations and take your money if you want to pay me, but I think you could better deploy your money elsewhere. And so, there's no shame in just saying, oh, well, for a while. So I'm a single mom. And, before I got divorced, I purposely, I cut back my practice. I mean, I had an office, I had brick and mortar, I had staff, I had tons of clients. And I got to a point where I'm like, my kids are in school. I want to be the PTA mom. I want to be, they did, my girls did cheer at one point, and Taekwondo. I'm halfway to my black belt in Taekwondo, and then
Good
COVID
for
hit, and
you.
I
Yeah.
like let it go. But I wanted to be able to take time. So I purposely cut my work hours back to where I was only working 20 hours a week. And that was it. Like, if anything was above that, nope, nope, I'm done. And if that's the life you want, I'm all for that. Like, so, but it all comes down to money. You've got to make sure you have enough money. And no matter how you slice it, you've got to have the marketing machine on all the time. No matter how big or small your firm is, how big you want it to be, it doesn't matter. You always have to have the marketing turned on so that you have what you want, right?
Yeah, I think if you're not, if you're in that mindset of like, I'm just gonna do good work, if you're seeing that's, supporting your business, the objectives of your business, and it's supporting the life that you want, and you feel confident in those referrals going forward, then
Yeah.
great. I think the mistake though is like a lot of people, like, they have this false sense that the referrals are going to be consistent and go on in perpetuity,
Yeah.
and they just don't. And so,
Right.
and the other thing too is that, I think of it the same way I think about investing, whether you're talking about stock market or real estate or whatever, like, you got to diversify. And so
Oh
if
yeah,
you're
good point.
if your
Yeah.
referrals are your only source of new business, like, you're beholden to them. And if
Yeah.
those referral sources go away, like, you got a single point of failure in your business. And it's just, I don't know, it just seems more risky to do that than it does to make the investments in, at the very minimum, brand building and top of mind awareness and nurturing existing referral relationships. Like that's to me is kind of like the table stakes.
Yeah. Nope, I agree with that. So when you meet with somebody and, brand new, and you're starting to talk about money, because I know what my number is, what do you recommend to people? So new firm comes in and says, hey, okay, what am I looking at? And, in ad spend, what, like, percentage of budget? Because I think that'll be the
Yeah.
most relatable.
So we start with top line all in marketing budget, because people
Yeah.
come in with all sorts of different ideas about
I
what's
can
in the
imagine.
marketing budget. Yeah. And
Right.
so, and also the other thing too that I'm really going to I'm going to give you a number, but I'm going to give you some,
Okay.
it depends. I'm going to give you some, it depends first,
Okay.
because it really comes back to like where you are in terms of your growth journey, right? Like if you're
Oh,
a
that's
brand
true.
new, if you're, I mean, this, if you're a
Yeah.
brand new law firm,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't have a war chest of marketing budget. You might not even be
Yeah.
profitable right now. And so my recommendation to you is going to look a lot different in terms of like how much money I would spend. But I'd probably be saying, look, figure out what the cost of your time is and then just use that as a proxy for money because you're going to have to spend more time if you don't
Totally.
have money, right? On
Yep.
the other end of the spectrum, you're an established firm. You're trying to take over incremental market share from competitors. You want to be the market dominating leader in a competitive practice area in a competitive city. Get ready to spend a lot more than what the median is. And so I always hedge with if you're gonna twist my arm and give me a number, I would say you're probably at like the 10 to 15% of top
Yeah.
line revenue. Now, that's I think the SBA recommends something in there.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, there's actually data on this. Clio has data on this. There's a company called Henge that does a lot of good research on marketing. And if you're one of these market dominating law firms, like a high growth law firm, like you're really going to start getting north 20-30% of top line revenue. Now, again, that's to capture that incremental market share. That's an
Yeah.
aggressive spend. But
Yeah.
that's what your cost per client's going to go up. I mean, it's most of the time to capture larger and larger percentage of the market, it's going to cost more and more for each incremental client. And so,
Right.
but if we want to come up with a number, I would say start with 10. I think if you're under
Yeah.
10, if you're an established firm, you're a profitable firm and you want to grow, if you're under 10 all in, you're probably undercapitalized in terms of your growth.
And that my answer is always 10% is my minimum. You've got to have 10% of gross revenue. And then exactly what you're talking about. From there, it's got to go up depending on what your goals are. And are you is it are you trying to aggressively grow? Then now you're approaching the 30. Like there's
Yeah.
no lie.
And
So
I'm all for, because people will say, well, what do I count in there? Am I counting like internal marketing resources? Am I counting my time? And I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, you can count whatever you want. You can throw it all in
Right.
there, whatever you want. Just
Right.
just keep in mind that it's not free, right? Like
Yeah.
we got to get out of this mindset that like my time is free. It's not free.
Right.
That's time you're not,
Yeah.
especially if you're a billable hour law firm, it's time you're
Yeah.
not spending billing clients. And
Yeah.
so there's a cost to it. It's time is
Yeah.
not an infinite resource, and so don't forget that if you're not going to spend money, you're spending time.
Yeah, and I have that same argument, when people are like, "Well, why should I hire you?" And I'm like, "Well, because I've got all these years of experience." I sad to say I've been a CPA for almost 30 years. But and I worked before that. So I've got a lot of experience, but I'm going to shortcut things for you because my experience, my education, I'm going to shortcut things for you, but it's also that you're not spending the time digging into how does this work and why does it work this way. I'm just giving you the answers. So it's so much more like it's just faster. It's faster knowledge. And it gives you the time that now you take that and you can do one of two things. You can either do billable work for clients, whether you're billing by the hour or whether you're, contingent or whatever it is, but client work, or you can turn that into personal time, your hobbies, your family, whatever. But it's time. It's money or time. So that's the advantage of bringing in a professional to be able to help you with your business. So
You'd
I know,
think lawyers would
absolutely.
know that since they sell expertise too, but
Right. No, absolutely. So, okay, so one last question. So if let's just go with low hanging fruit. So somebody, small solo, no staff, handful of clients, sustainable at this point, like they're probably breaking even, making a little bit of a profit, looking to grow, in that hesitancy in the back of their head of oh my God, I'm gonna, turn on some marketing thing and I'm gonna have 10,000 leads coming in and I can't handle it, which we know doesn't ever happen. But what would you tell somebody who's like, hey, I'm at 100,000, I want to double to 200,000? What would be an easy entry level thing that somebody that's not done marketing before, what would be advice that you'd give them?
So I'm going to assume that they already have worked out, they've got capacity to handle that growth. I'm going to assume they've got intake locked down, that they're doing, they're providing exceptional service experience on the front end, because that's the place I would spend my time and money fixing first before I spend any time trying to get any kind of incremental more clients. Um,
Yep.
and then I would think about it this way. I would say, if you don't have a brand, you're relatively newish, or you're not a known name, like people aren't like, they're not the go-to person. I'm going to say you're going to be 80% of your budget is going to be in what I'm going to call top of funnel acquisition. So that's going to be things like, I would get your Google business profile locked down. That's free. You can go claim that profile, make sure the information's right. If you've got happy clients that are willing to sing your praises, I would be directing them there so that you start building reviews up on there.
Yeah.
Um, and then I would be doing a lot. I mean, I'd be spending a lot of time. I'd be spending time creating videos and starting to make connections, because that's the other thing too, is that we talk about historically this distinction between like traditional client development and then online marketing, and the lines are blurred. Think about
Yeah.
our relationship. We met
Yeah.
in the, we probably crossed paths online at some point. We met in real
Right.
life, and that solidified a relationship that now, when I see your stuff online, I'm more likely to engage and comment on it because I know you. And so I tell lawyers, invest the time it takes them to do that, because it doesn't take that much time. If you set aside like 10-15 minutes every morning
Mhm.
just to be engaging and social and connect with people online, it's going to pay a lot of dividends. You're going to be shocked to
Yeah.
see like people are actually going to start referring you business. There are private Facebook groups that I would be participating in. Maximum Lawyer on the Beach on Facebook,
Oh yeah.
where
Hmm.
lawyers they're referring business to each other, they're nurturing
Yeah.
relationships. And so that's what I would focus on. If you're at the law firm persona that you described, forget about going crazy with Google ads. Maybe you could do local services ads because it's pay per lead, and maybe you can get, but again, all this stuff is always comes back to the same thing. This is why when you ask me that question, like one question,
Yeah.
does your marketing channel or
Yeah.
do your ad investments match your financial metrics? What is your target cost per client? And are you able to generate clients at the number that you need to support your business through that channel? If you're not,
Mm.
then don't worry about it. AdWords isn't, Google Ads isn't for everybody. Local service
Yeah.
ads isn't for everybody. Figure out the things that generate business for you within your financial framework, within your target cost per client, and within your
Yeah.
profitability targets.
No, absolutely. And I agree with that. I mean, a lot of times I'll have somebody that'll say to me, 10% of my budget, that's huge. I can't do it. Or, 10% of my top line revenue, I can't. And I'm like, okay, let's translate this backwards. Let's take it. How many clients do you have? What was your client acquisition cost per client? And then when I tell, so somebody gives me, grief, they don't want to spend, they don't want to put, $1,000 into a marketing effort, for example. And I'll say, well, do you realize that you spent $1,000 and you ended up with, I don't know, 20 clients. So do the math. And now is that acceptable to you? Is that cost acceptable to you on a per client basis? Yeah. Okay, let's do that more. Like that. So sometimes you have to break things down and look at it differently to be able to understand. Sometimes when you see the bill from Google or Facebook ads or, print ad or whatever the ad is, and you're like, I can't afford that. But when you look at it on a per client basis and you're like, oh, that's not actually so bad. Maybe it only cost me, $200 or $300 per client. Now I can justify that, right?
Exactly. And do the opposite, right? Do that
Yeah.
same analysis on your
Yeah.
referrals, because so many
Yes.
times lawyers will say things like, this is my best referral source that I've ever had. And then you actually
Yeah.
go and like, all right, let's actually look at it. How many clients have they sent you over the last 5 years? None. How much time and money
One.
have you nurtured that relationship? A lot.
Right.
In fact,
Right.
more than you would have spent on Facebook ads.
Right.
So
Which, if they sent you one referral and that referral turned out to be $1 million client, then okay, great. But because then the last part of that is if it costs you $200 to get one client, but that one client, on average, if one new client brings you in $10,000, wow, now I'm good. But if you spend $200 and that new client only brings you in $1,000, we need to reconsider that. That's too high of a cost, to bring in a new client. So
Totally. And the other thing
yeah,
that you made me think about there with that is when you're looking at client values, use medians, not means. People will be like, oh,
yeah,
I got two clients, and so I'm just going to add them together and divide by two, and that gives me my mean. I'm like, well, one client was $10 million and this other client's
right.
$2,000. It doesn't work like that,
No,
So
right.
median will help you get a better sense of your actual quote unquote average
Yeah,
value of a client
yeah,
than just straight up mean does. And so again, to your point, it's
yeah,
especially if you've got this data scarcity issue where you don't have a lot of data. That's the other thing too.
yeah.
Everybody's talking about data is like the best thing ever, and I'm like, yeah, only if you have statistically significant data that's actually mathematically
Right,
telling you anything. Otherwise, you're calling it data, but it's just like a
right.
slightly better guess than totally out of nowhere.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that was a thing. So when I did some webinars over the summer, and one of the very first, we did a polling question, and somebody said it was something like, "How do you budget or manage your cash?" And somebody was like, "Vibes." And so then that became kind of a running joke through the whole series of webinars that we did. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's so true. Like, don't do the vibes. Like, yes, I'm a numbers person, and I love my spreadsheets, and I love, I just love, I geek out on this stuff, but." I'm not telling you, you still need to look at the numbers because they're hard, like they're facts, okay? But don't go with the vibes. I mean, vibes will get you sometimes down the wrong path. so,
Right.
so,
Right.
but
Vibes are
sometimes it's
wrong.
good, right? Vibes could be wrong. I'm trying to think. So like you can go from Jeff Bezos starting Amazon in his garage, and he had good vibes apparently, and that turned into he lives on a yacht now with some amazing girlfriend. But I'm trying to think who's crashed and burned lately. Like there's got to be somebody, but it's just not coming to mind. But
Yeah, I'm
vibes
sure
aren't
Jeff Bezos
always.
is looking at plenty of numbers, plenty of data
Oh,
in
oh,
his business.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So, well, Gyi, thank you so much for being here on the podcast. And you should know, so I've done this podcast. This will be episode, I think 76 or 77, and I've
awesome.
only ever had one guest before you.
Well,
So,
thank you. I'm
yeah.
honored and privileged. It's
Yeah.
great talking. I
Yeah.
really enjoy talking with you about this stuff. Keep getting the
Absolutely.
word out. Lawyers need to know about their
Yeah.
P&Ls and how to run their businesses. So glad that we were able to sit and chat today and share some of our knowledge.
No, absolutely. I've had an enjoyable conversation. Hopefully we can do it again.
Absolutely.
So that wraps up our conversation with Gyi, and I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Be sure to check out the show notes so that you can see the links to connect with Gyi directly. So are you curious about working with Profit Scale Thrive? Running a successful law firm requires more than just legal expertise. It demands financial acumen, strategic planning, and the ability to make informed decisions. So my accounting firm, Profit Scale Thrive, supports law firms in several different ways designed to elevate your law firm's financial performance and set you on the path to sustainable growth. If you're curious to learn more, check out my website at profitscalethrive.com. If you have any questions about today's episode, please let me know by commenting below. And if you know someone who might need to hear this information, please share this episode with them. Be sure to follow and subscribe to get notifications for future episodes. Did you enjoy this episode? Please consider leaving a review. And before I go, remember, profit is something you intentionally plan for in the beginning. It's not a potential bonus at the end of the year. Thanks and have a great day.